That Christmas Eve, the Minnesota cold cut straight through my thin coat as I stood in front of the brand new walnut door of the huge house. Thick fog blanketed the front yard, and the golden light spilling through the frosted windows created a glow that was both beautiful and unsettling. Cold, sharp, and somehow wrong. In my hand, my phone was still warm from the short call I just ended with my grandfather, Harold. "Damien, get over here right now," he'd said, his voice trembling. Not from the cold, but from something that sounded a lot like excitement. "I'm at your parents' new house. Something good is happening. You have to come see." My grandfather, Harold Knight, was a successful businessman who spent his life flying between real estate projects and deals in Boston. He was so busy that I saw him maybe twice a year, 3 times if I was lucky. But the moment he said he wanted to see me, my heart tightened. And just imagining him smiling on the other side of that door, I walked faster. I pushed the door open. Instantly, warmth from the fireplace and the sweet, smoky smell of roasted meat hit me in the face. The whole place glittered with Christmas lights, a towering tree reaching the ceiling, and at the head of the long dining table, Harold stood up the second he saw me. "Damien, you're here!" He pulled me into a tight hug, the familiar woody scent of his cologne making something inside my chest ache. It was still him, the only person in my family who ever made me feel seen. Then he gestured proudly at the massive house, eyes shining like stars. "What do you think? Beautiful, isn't it? This is going to be your new home?" I froze. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "My home?" I asked quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "But this is Mom and Dad's house." A heavy silence dropped like lead. My grandfather's face turned to stone. His eyes flicked from me to the man sitting at the far end of the table. My father, Marcus Hale. His hand was shaking, the rim of his wine glass tapped lightly against the plate, a tiny sound almost swallowed by the crackling fireplace. Next to him sat Elizabeth Hale, my stepmother, the woman who always wore a perfect smile but had eyes cold as frost. This time her smile twisted, forced, and frightening. "Your parents' house?" Grandfather Harold's voice dropped, sharp as ice. "Damien, explain?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I had no idea what was going on, but the instinct that had saved me from being dismissed 1,000 times before was screaming that something was very, very wrong. I turned to my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Not even for a second. Like a coward caught red-handed. Elizabeth spoke first, her voice trembling but trying to sound calm. "Mr. Harold, there must be some misunderstanding. This is our house, our family's house. Damien just misspoke. I wasn't asking you." My grandfather practically growled. He looked straight at me. Those eyes, full of love, fury, and desperation, told me that whatever was about to come out was going to change my life forever. And this is probably the moment I should introduce myself properly. My name is Damien Hale. This story is the story of how I grew up in the shadows, treated like trash by the very people who were supposed to be my family. If you've ever felt like you don't belong in the place you're supposed to call home, if you've ever been treated like an outsider under your own roof, if you've ever wondered whether you actually exist or if you're just a faint shadow in everyone else's eyes, then you'll understand me. I was born in a small town in Minnesota where autumn smells like red leaves and winter feels long enough to swallow everything whole. But my family, we were different in a way nobody would ever wish for. My mother died right after giving birth to me, from complications I still don't fully understand. I never even got to see her eyes. But from the stories my grandfather told me that she was the only light I was ever meant to have, even though I never got to hold her once. My father, Marcus, is a strict, cold man. Sometimes I wondered if I was really his son at all. He never yelled, never hit, never argued. He just didn't look at me. Like every time he saw me, he was reminded of a pain he wanted buried forever. When I was 3, he wrongly married Elizabeth, a woman with a beautiful smile and a heart sharp as a blade. Together they had a son, Julian Hale. Julian, or Jules, was the sun in their world. And me? I was just the shadow behind the curtain, never important enough to be seen. I noticed the difference very, very early. There's one memory I've never been able to shake. I was 5 years old. I sat alone in the corner of the living room, hugging my old stuffed bear, watching Julian open the brand new remote control car every kid on the planet wanted. I remember that moment so clearly it still stings every time it comes back. Not because of the gift itself, because of their smiles, because of the happy, shining eyes they gave Julian. The kind of look I had never once received. I still remember the day I got the very first birthday present I ever bought for myself. A beat-up red plastic car with chipped wheels that squeaked every time it rolled across the floor. I held it with the tiny, trembling joy of a 6-year-old. But my father, Marcus, just glanced over and said flatly, "That's enough for you, Damien. Don't ask for things you don't need." Elizabeth clicked her tongue, voice sugary but sharp enough to cut. "Julian needs new things to stimulate his intelligence. You understand, don't you? Everyone has their place, as if I'd been born standing in the wrong spot." I wasn't a jealous kid, I swear I wasn't. I just wanted someone to see me. Just once, just one person in that house to notice the small things I tried so hard to do right. But whenever I brought home an A, Marcus would only nod, his eyes sliding past me, like cold wind. Not bad. Don't get cocky. Meanwhile, if Julian came home with a C, the whole family acted like he'd just been handed an honorary doctorate. There were cheers, hugs, a special dinner. Elizabeth's words kept coming, over and over, like needles. "Damien, why can't you be more like Julian? You should be grateful you even get to live in this house. Don't make everyone disappointed in you again." No matter how softly she said them, every word carved thin, deep lines into me until I started asking myself, am I really a burden? Do I actually deserve to be spoken to like this? We weren't poor, but we weren't rich either. Marcus was a mid-level manager at a local insurance company. Elizabeth stayed home and treated Julian like a little prince. And me, the good, quiet kid, I had to remind myself to stay silent so I wouldn't be seen as a problem. I was given the tiny attic room, really just a cleaned-out storage space with a creaky old bed and one small window that looked out onto a dark, damp alley. Julian's room was big, bright, filled with brand-new toys, walls covered in posters of famous bands and expensive model collections. Once I gathered every ounce of courage I had and asked, "Why can't I have a room downstairs like Julian?" Marcus whipped around, voice rising with an anger I didn't understand. "Don't push it, Damien. Know your place. I hated that word. It felt like a life sentence handed down when I was still too small to fight back. But I kept growing anyway, kept forcing smiles, swallowing tears, hiding the storm raging inside. I told myself that one day I would step out of this shadow. I would prove I wasn't the worthless thing they thought I was. When I turned 18, I graduated high school. Nobody in the house asked my class, rank, my GPA, or what I wanted to do with my life. The house was as quiet that day as any other. No congratulations, no little cake, no proud glances. I wanted to go to college. I dreamed of becoming an engineer, of doing something that would make Grandpa Harold proud, the only person who had ever seen any value in me. But that dream collapsed faster than I could grab it. One evening, I worked up the nerve to ask Marcus about scholarships and financial help. He looked at me with those empty, icy eyes and said, "Damien, we don't have the money. Julian has to come first. He has potential. He's the one worth investing in." I stood there like someone had punched me straight in the chest. Julian, the kid who played video games all day and complained about school, was the one with potential. And me, the one who had never let them down, was simply not worth it. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded, walked out of the room, and stepped away from the very last hope that my family would ever choose me, even once. That night, lying on my creaky bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, I made a promise to myself. If no one believes in me, I'll believe in myself. I'll climb on my own, even if I have to do it alone. The next day, I got a job at the Walmart in town. Started as a cashier, then moved to the stockroom. Long night shifts, working holidays, rude customers, harsh words. Everything wore my body down, but none of it touched the fire inside me. Every single dollar I earned, no matter how small, was one more step towards separating myself from the Hale house forever. I rented a tiny apartment. Yellowed walls, a faucet that dripped no matter how many times I tightened it, and the occasional sound of mice racing across the ceiling at night. But it was mine. No disappointed sighs from Marcus. No contemptuous glances from Elizabeth. Meanwhile, Julian still lived like a prince. Private school, brand new car, the latest phone, a bright, fully paved future handed to him on a silver platter. Once, Elizabeth stopped by the store where I worked. She saw me behind the register in my wrinkled uniform, sweat dripping after a 10-hour shift. She smiled that sugar-coated, venomous smile. "Damien? So this is what you're doing now? Such a shame. Julian will never have to lower himself to this kind of work." I forced a smile back. But inside I wanted to scream, why? Why am I not worthy? Why was I the only one left behind? Those years, I lived in a kind of loneliness no one else seemed to have. Not the loneliness of having no one around. The loneliness of standing in a room full of people and still being completely invisible. I didn't have many friends. I didn't have time for them. Most of my life revolved around work, saving every penny, and trying to keep my heart from cracking any further. But in the middle of all that darkness, there was still one light. Grandpa Harold. He lived in Chicago running a big construction company, his schedule packed down to the minute. Yet somehow, whenever he had even a sliver of free time, he called me. Those calls were the real-life raft in the freezing ocean of my youth. "Damien, you're a strong young man. Never let anyone make you doubt that." He told me about the projects he was building. Bridges, skyscrapers, blueprints that let me imagine a world far beyond this suffocating little town. And he asked how I was eating, if work was okay, if I was tired and needed rest. But I never told him how Marcus and Elizabeth treated me. I didn't want him to worry, and deep down, I was terrified that if I said it out loud, he'd think I was weak, pathetic, pitiful. He was the only one who ever told me about my mom, about Anna. "You're just like her," he'd say, voice catching every time her name came up. She was gentle, kind, loved books, and always believed the world could be better. She dreamed of fairness. If I'd been there when she gave birth to you, everything would have been different. I never blamed him. I just wished I could have seen her once. Just once. So I'd know I had truly been loved, even for a moment. Over time, I got used to living on my own. I learned how to fix leaky pipes, change light bulbs, cook simple meals with the cheapest instant noodles and eggs. I learned not to expect anyone. Not to wait for praise, not to wait for a hug, not to wait for someone to walk into my tiny apartment and ask if I was okay. But deep inside, there was still an ice-cold void, the shape of a family I never really had. And I had no idea that, while I was trying to build a life of my own, Marcus and Elizabeth were hiding a secret that could shatter everything. I was 21, still living in that little apartment on the south side of town. One hard knock on the wall and chunks of old plaster would rain down. I worked night shifts at the supermarket, slept through damp, exhausted mornings, and ate meals like a temporary guest in my own life. But it was freedom, space I had earned with my own hands. The tiny bit of self-respect I'd traded years of silent suffering to get. One early summer afternoon, while I was at the register, scanner beeping nonstop, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text. From Elizabeth. "Come to the new house tonight, okay?" 432, Hollow Creek, small party. I read it 3 times, 4 times. My hand froze over the item I was scanning. A new house? Since when did they move? Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't anyone ask if I even wanted to come? I stood there for a long time, as if the message was a puzzle I had to solve. Part of me wanted to ignore it, delete it, pretend I never saw it. But then, maybe I still wanted to believe. Wanted to give them, and myself, one chance. A polite visit, a little connection, or at least a decent congratulations. I wanted to go, maybe to wish them well. Maybe to prove I wasn't the sullen, ignored kid anymore. Maybe to show I had become someone else entirely. I stopped by the liquor store near the supermarket and picked out a decent bottle of red wine. Nothing flashy, but not cheap either. Then I swung by the little embroidery shop downtown to grab the handkerchief I'd ordered earlier. It had the initials MH stitched in the corner. Marcus Hale. I didn't have much, but I wanted whatever I brought to feel like a gift, not an obligation. The new house was in the West Side neighborhood, a part of town I'd never had reason to visit. As my car turned onto the street lined with newly planted maple trees, their leaves still bright green, and lawns trimmed so perfectly they looked painted. I felt like I was crossing into a world that had never been meant for me. A world full of light, stability, and money. A world I'd never been invited to. But that night, they had called me. I didn't know yet that the key to my entire life was waiting behind that door. The houses in the new development looked like they'd been ripped straight from the pages of an architecture magazine. 2-story colonials, dark walnut front doors, smoky gray tile roofs, and wide brick steps leading up to generous porches. Everything radiated order, prosperity, a kind of tidy perfection that felt almost cold. A world I'd only ever seen through glass, never belonged to. When I pulled up to the address Elizabeth had sent, my heart started doing something strange. The house was cream-colored, with a stone-paved front yard, a wide porch, and arched windows looking out over a meticulously landscaped garden. Like a private design team had been involved. Warm golden light spilled from inside, but I still stood beside my car for a few seconds, fingers tightening on the gift bag. Not excitement, not nerves, just the feeling that I was about to step into someone else's life. Elizabeth opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing a champagne-colored silk dress, makeup flawless, soft curls brushing her shoulders like she'd just walked off a magazine cover shoot. "Oh, Damien, come in," her smile thin and brittle as the blush on her cheeks. I stepped inside and the living room instantly made me feel out of place. Polished hardwood floors, brand new granite fireplace, beige armchairs arranged with perfect symmetry, a classic chandelier overhead that looked like it had been dusted minutes before I arrived. Then I saw the photo wall. Marcus and Elizabeth's wedding portrait. Julian holding a sports trophy, grinning like a stadium spotlight was on him. Family beach vacation, Christmas party shots. Not a single picture of me, not one. I told myself it didn't hurt, but inside my chest, my heart felt like someone was dragging a small, sharp knife slowly across it. Marcus was in the kitchen opening an expensive bottle of wine, white shirt sleeves rolled up casually. When he saw me, he just gave a single nod. "Oh, you made it." Nothing more. No, "How are you?" No long drive. No, "Good to see you." I handed him the wine and the gift bag. "Congratulations on the new house, Dad." He took them, set them on the counter like a book he had no intention of reading. Didn't open them, didn't even glance back. There were a few other people, new neighbors, an older couple, one of Marcus's coworkers. They talked loudly about rising property values, Scandinavian interior trends, the pool they were planning for the backyard, and all the amenities of the new development. I sat in the corner, poured myself a glass of water, and listened like I was watching a movie about a life I'd never been cast in. Nobody asked my name. Nobody asked what I did for a living. Nobody even wondered how I was related to Marcus and Elizabeth. "It was so hard to find this house," Elizabeth was telling the female neighbor, voice dripping with pride. "We got lucky. Closed right before the market spiked. The neighbor laughed, impressed. Marcus really has an eye for real estate. Marcus smiled, didn't correct her. I forced a smile too. I really did want to be happy for them. Not because the house was so beautiful, it made me feel small, because I thought maybe, finally, they'd found something that made them happy. I had no idea that in the moment I smiled, I was accidentally congratulating them for receiving the gift that was supposed to have been mine. That night, when I got back to my rundown rental, I yat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, ready to text Grandpa Harold about the evening. But my fingers stopped halfway. He's old. He's busy. He already has enough on his plate. I didn't want to bother him with petty details from a life he thought was long settled. I set the phone down, lay back and stared at the peeling ceiling, and fell asleep without knowing the truth was lying right beneath my feet, like a bomb waiting for someone to pull the pin. After that housewarming, life slid back into its old rhythm, or rather the numb, indifferent rhythm I'd grown used to. No one mentioned the party, no one asked what I thought of the house, and of course no one invited me to move in. But then something strange started happening. From that day forward, every major holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Julian's birthday, Marcus and Elizabeth's wedding anniversary, I received an invitation. Not once, not randomly, regularly. Like someone was deliberately pulling me back into that house's orbit until the secret could no longer stay hidden. Those invitations weren't the warm kind a family sends when they miss you. They were the polite, curt messages you send a junior employee. PM, come for dinner. Julian wants to see you. We have guests. Be on time. That was it. No emojis. No take care of yourself. No, we'd really love to see you. I went not because I believed they'd changed, but because some stupid, stubborn part of me still felt a twisted sense of duty toward Marcus. Even though he had never once felt that duty toward me. Like a habit. Like a pathetic leftover loyalty. Every time I brought a small gift, a pretty box of pastries I picked out after my shift, a reasonably priced bottle of wine, a handkerchief I wrapped myself. But those gifts were always set aside unopened, barely glanced at, then forgotten on a table. No real thank you. No one looked at me long enough to mean it. And then, the weirdness really began. They wanted me in the family photos. The first time was Christmas. Elizabeth called me over like she'd rehearsed the line in the mirror. Damien, come stand closer to Julian. We're taking a family picture. Family. The words sounded borrowed coming out of her mouth. I stepped in. Marcus in the center, arm around Julian's shoulders. Me on the very edge, wearing a crooked smile. When the shutter clicked, I felt like I'd just walked onto the set of a play where I was an extra hired by the hour. The next times, they pushed harder. Big family portraits, just me and Marcus. Me standing next to Julian, all of us in front of the Christmas tree. Once, and this one sent a chill down my spine, Elizabeth put her hand on my shoulder like she'd done it 1,000 times before, and flashed a smile so bright it felt fake. I didn't understand. No one had ever needed me in the frame before. Not one picture of me had ever hung in the old house. Why now? Why were they doing this? Why did they suddenly need me in those photos? After Julian's birthday dinner, I finally worked up the courage to ask, why all the family photos lately? Elizabeth laughed, light as a feather, but strange. Oh, just wanting to capture memories. Damien, you're part of this family too, aren't you? I nodded, but something inside me sank like a stone. I wasn't naive. Something was wrong. An invisible hand was arranging everything, pulling me closer in a way that made me feel odd. Like I was playing the role of the dutiful older son for some display picture. Not like I was actually me. And then on the Christmas when I was 23, the truth exploded like a bomb. That day was so cold my breath turned to white mist. The second I cracked the window, I'd gotten off work at 4:30 p.m., was sitting in my tiny rental drinking cold coffee, planning to show up late to the party like always, Just appear, eat a few bites, take a few pictures, slip out early, And right at that moment, my phone rang. Grandpa Harold. Damien, get over here right now. I'm at your new house, 1432 Hollow Creek. I have a surprise for you. I froze. Grandpa Harold almost never left Chicago. His massive construction company chained him to a schedule packed from dawn to midnight, and he had never once come to Ohio without telling me first. I shot to my feet, didn't even finish the sip of coffee, grabbed my coat, ran to the car. The entire drive, my mind was spinning. Why was he there? Why was he at Marcus and Elizabeth's house? When I arrived, the house was blazing with Christmas lights, wreaths on the door, the tree glowing through the windows. Everything beautiful in a way that felt suspicious. I knocked. My heart was trying to punch its way out of my chest. Elizabeth opened the door. Her smile froze the second she saw me. Damien, why are you... She stopped dead. Her eyes flicked past my shoulder like she'd just seen a ghost. Then Grandpa's voice boomed from the living room. Damien, get in here, son. I stepped inside. Harold stood in the middle of the room, tall silver hair shining under the chandelier. He pulled me into a tight hug. An excited hug, but underneath it was a strange electric tension. I wanted to surprise the whole family, he said, looking around with a proud grin. This house is incredible. You must be so happy living here. I went rigid. A cold wave shot down my spine. Grandpa, I don't live here. The moment the words left my mouth, the living room fell into absolute silence. A silence so thick I could hear my own blood pounding in my ears. That was the moment everything started to collapse. I was just visiting. The smile vanished from Grandpa Harold's face like someone had blown out a candle. He turned, slowly, dangerously, toward Marcus, who stood by the fireplace still holding his glass of red wine. The wine looked like blood. Elizabeth jumped in instantly, voice syrupy but trembling like a wire, about to snap. There's obviously a misunderstanding. Damien likes living on his own, don't you, honey? She looked at me. Her eyes weren't asking, they were ordering me to nod. But Grandpa didn't even glance at her, not for a second. He stared straight at me, eyes sharp enough to cut skin. Damien, tell me the truth. You do not live here. I took a deep breath. The whole room felt like it was pressing down on my shoulders. Grandpa, I live in a rented apartment on the south side of town. I pay for it with my night shift wages from the supermarket. A heavy, suffocating silence crashed over the room, like all the air had been sucked out. Marcus dropped his gaze. His knuckles went white around the wine glass. Elizabeth opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I could hear my heartbeat, loud, violent, trying to tear out of my chest. Then Grandpa spoke, voice low and cold as steel. Marcus, explain. No one answered. He clenched his jaw and suddenly his voice thundered with pure rage. 2 years ago, I sent you $400,000 to buy a 3-bedroom house in this neighborhood. A gift for Damien. I was very clear. That house belongs to him. So why is he living in a crumbling apartment while you and your wife are living in the house that was meant for him? My heart dropped to the floor. 400,000? A 3-bedroom house? For me? I stared at Marcus, searching for denial, an explanation, anything. But he just stood there, pale as a corpse. Elizabeth tried to recover. You don't understand. Damien isn't even his real... Shut up! Grandpa roared, the sound so loud the chandelier trembled. Elizabeth froze, lips shaking. What do you mean? Grandpa snarled. Damien isn't Marcus's biological son, so he doesn't deserve a home? The room drowned in terrifying silence. Grandpa stepped toward Marcus until I could see his breath shaking with fury. Marcus, the house is in your name, isn't it? Marcus didn't answer. His shoulders were trembling. The wine glass rattled in his hand. Elizabeth cut in, desperate. Julian is the future of this family. Damien, he He is my blood. Grandpa's voice exploded like thunder. Damien is the son of Diana, my daughter. He is my grandson. I trusted you to take care of him. And what did you do? You stole the gift I gave him? Then you lied to me with these fake family photos? He jabbed a finger at the picture on the wall. The happy family portrait. Marcus's arm around Julian, Elizabeth beaming, and me squeezed at the very edge wearing a forced, awkward smile. My throat closed up. So that's why? All those photos, they dragged me into the fake smiles, the strange touches, the shots of just me and Marcus. All of it just to deceive Grandpa, to prove to him that I was living happily in that house. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked into pieces. I didn't know anything about this. Grandpa Harold turned to me, his tone softening but still firm. Damien, Diana's son. From now on, you tell me everything. I looked at him, saw the heartbreak, the disappointment, the fury swirling in those old eyes. And for the first time in my life, I knew I no longer had to stay silent. Go pack your things. You're coming to Chicago with me. This house, I'll make sure it belongs to you exactly as I intended. And you, Marcus, I'll be speaking with my lawyers. You will pay for what you've done. Grandpa Harold's voice rang out, so powerful the granite fireplace seemed to tremble. Elizabeth burst into tears, but I felt no pity for her anymore. Those tears had never been for me. Never once. Marcus finally spoke, his voice so weak I barely recognized it. Damien, I only wanted what was best for the family. I turned to him, no longer angry, just empty after 23 years of nothing. Best for the family? I repeated, calm but ice cold. You never once considered me part of this family. I saw his shoulders shake, but I didn't stop. I spent my whole life trying to make you proud. I did everything just so you would see me, but the only person you ever saw was Julian. I drew a deep breath. My nose stung, but I refused to cry. You stole my chance, you hid it from me, and you couldn't even be bothered to tell me the truth. I turned away. I couldn't look at him anymore. Grandpa placed a hand on my shoulder, the hand of the only person still on my side. Let's go, Damien. You don't have to stay here another second. We stepped out into the skin-cutting cold of Christmas night. In my head, the image of that house still echoed, the house that should have been mine, the one that could have been the start of a different life. The wind howled, snow whipped through the air. My breath dissolved into the freezing darkness like a goodbye stuck in my throat. Grandpa led me to the gleaming black SUV parked at the curb. The driver, a middle-aged man in a suit, opened the doors for us and gave a small nod. To the hotel first, Grandpa said, voice steady. I slid into the back seat. The soft click of the door closing felt like the final shutting of an old, rotten chapter. I looked at Grandpa. He looked back at me, eyes gentle but reading every emotion churning inside me. You okay, Damien? He asked. I swallowed hard. I don't know yet. Everything happened so fast, I still don't understand it all. He nodded and rested a hand on my knee. I know, but from now on, everything will be different. You're coming to Chicago with me. We'll start over, just the two of us. I turned to the window. Christmas lights blurred past like desperate sparks trying to cling to the night. Chicago, the city I only knew from his stories. The place he had built an empire with nothing but his own hands. A place I never thought I'd set foot in. But now it was the place I was being given a new beginning. A new promise. A chance to stand up after years of being invisible. The next morning, we took an early flight to Chicago. I sat by the window, watching the sky open wide and the snow-covered fields far below. It felt like I was leaving behind not just an old town, but an entire broken life. Grandpa sat beside me, reading the business section as always. Every now and then he'd glance up, look at me, and give an encouraging smile. His presence alone made it easier to breathe. When the plane touched down at O'Hare, I was greeted by biting wind and the restless pulse of Chicago. James, Grandpa's loyal driver, was waiting beside the familiar SUV. We sped through downtown, skyscrapers stabbing the gray sky, steel and glass reflecting the pale winter light. Everything was bigger, louder, more alive than anything I'd ever seen in Ohio. Finally, the car turned into an upscale suburb, cobblestone streets, ancient oaks standing like sentries, and sprawling estates glowing against the snow. James stopped in front of a towering wrought iron gate. Black, sleek, intricate. Beyond it, a long driveway led to a 3-story mansion surrounded by sweeping lawns and rose bushes still blazing red, defiant even in the brutal winter. My jaw dropped. This is your house? My voice shook uncontrollably. Grandpa Harold let out a big, warm laugh and clapped me on the shoulder. Welcome home, Damien, and from now on, it's your home, too. My heart clenched. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Grandpa's mansion wasn't a house. It was a palace. The carved wooden front door opened into a huge foyer, polished marble floors, a sweeping spiral staircase curling up to the second floor, abstract paintings lining both walls. The living room alone was 3 times the size of my old apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the backyard, a swimming pool, a built-in grill area, towering evergreens standing proud. I stood there clutching the small canvas bag that held everything I owned in the world. A few t-shirts, a notebook, an old towel. I don't even know what to say, I whispered. You don't have to say anything, he answered, taking my hand and leading me upstairs. Your room is right here. He opened the door. A huge bedroom, a king-size bed with thick, soft blankets, a walnut desk, windows overlooking the garden, a brand-new laptop sitting on the desk, plush carpet under my feet. This is where you start over. I just stood there, frozen. Every loss, every wound, everything collapsed into one single feeling. For the first time in my life, I was welcomed. No pressure, no burden, just a new beginning. I sat on the edge of the enormous bed in my own room, fingers brushing the silky sheets like I was touching a dream. Only hours ago, I'd been in that rundown apartment where the faucet never stopped dripping, the ceiling peeled in chunks, and the noise from downstairs kept me awake. And now I was sitting in a room I hadn't even dared imagine. A place with no rattling fan, no moldy smell, no feeling of being trapped inside my own life. But amid all the wonder, there was still a thorn lodged deep in my chest. The house in Ohio. The house that had been mine for 2 whole years without me knowing. That pain still smoldered. That night, Grandpa took me to an upscale restaurant in downtown Chicago, the kind of place that felt unreachable just from looking through the window. We sat at a small table, candlelight flickering across crystal glasses. He ordered an expensive bottle of wine. I took only a tiny sip. The rich taste felt foreign on my tongue. Damien, he began, voice low and deliberate. There are things we need to talk about. About Marcus, the house, and what really happened. I nodded. I knew this conversation wouldn't be easy. My heart was pounding, like it wanted to escape my ribs. Grandpa took a deep breath. 2 years ago, I wired Marcus $400,000 to buy the house on Hollow Creek. I wanted it to be your gift, a foundation for your future. He paused. His eyes darkened. I was swamped with the company. I couldn't oversee everything myself. I trusted my son-in-law to do exactly what I asked. I felt my hands clench beneath the table. And Dad kept the house for himself? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Grandpa shook his head. It's worse than that. His voice turned dangerous. Ever since you were little, I sent money regularly. For tuition, clothes, whatever you needed. Every single year. I thought you were being taken care of. But every dollar... He stopped, his hand trembling with rage, went straight into Marcus's pocket. and paid for his new family. An invisible fist slammed into my chest. The tuition I never received, the clothes I never got, all those years eating instant noodles, wearing secondhand clothes, working night shifts just to survive. None of it had to happen. My throat closed. I didn't know anything. Dad never told me. I thought we just didn't have the money. Grandpa slammed his fist on the table. The glasses clinked loudly. God damn it. Heads turned, but he didn't care. I trusted him with you. I believed he would take care of my only grandson. But he betrayed me. And he betrayed Diana. Hearing my mother's name made my eyes burn. I never met her, but from every story Grandpa told me, I knew she had wanted a better life for me. A life Marcus had stolen. What are you going to do, Grandpa? I asked, though I already half knew the answer. He clenched his fists. I'm suing Marcus. I will make sure that house is transferred to your name, and I'm cutting off every cent he's ever gotten from us. He doesn't deserve another penny from this family. I stared at the tablecloth. Emotions tore through me. Part of me wanted Marcus to pay, wanted him to lose everything, wanted him to feel the pain I'd carried for years. But another part, the part that had been abandoned and endured for so long, just wanted to let go. I didn't want my new life dragged back into that old swamp. I didn't want Chicago, my fresh start, stained by lawsuits and hatred. I looked up and met Grandpa's eyes straight on. Grandpa, don't sue him. He stared at me, wide-eyed, like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. I went on, my voice soft but somehow rock-steady. I know you're furious. I am too. But it's already happened. I don't want to keep this hatred alive any longer. I swallowed hard, fighting the tremor in my throat. Cutting off their money, that's enough. It'll teach them they can't use you or me ever again. Grandpa looked at me for a long, long time. His eyes softened. Pride and pain mingled there. Damien, he whispered, you're more like your mother than I ever imagined. And for the first time that night, I let myself breathe. I just want to start fresh here, with you. When I said that, Grandpa Harold's gaze turned gentle. Still, the hurt and disappointment of so many years glimmered in his old eyes. Are you sure, Damien? He asked quietly, but his voice cut like it was weighing my very soul. You have every right to take back what's yours. I took a deep breath. I'm sure that house. It doesn't matter anymore. I want to build a future, not spend my life fixing the past. Grandpa nodded slowly. His hand settled on my shoulder, not just comfort, but acknowledgement, strength, a vow. You're stronger than you know, Damien, and your mother, Diana, she would be so proud of you. The weeks that followed in Chicago felt like rebirth. I moved fully into Grandpa's mansion. Every morning I woke up in a room flooded with light. It felt like I was learning how to live all over again. Harold didn't just give me a roof. He gave me the chance my own father never wanted me to have. He took me to his construction company, a sleek glass tower in the heart of Chicago. Inside, bright offices, printers humming, footsteps, keyboards clacking like the soundtrack of a future. He introduced me to everyone. This is my grandson, Damien Hale. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the family shadow. I was seen, shaken hands with, greeted with real smiles. One day, as we stood overlooking a construction site on the outskirts, huge cranes reaching into the gray sky, he asked, "Would you like to try working here? Nothing big. You can start small. Learn step by step." I hesitated. My whole life, I'd only known supermarkets, warehouses, scanning items, stacking boxes. I never thought I'd touch blueprints or budgets or real buildings. But the way Grandpa looked at me like he saw someone capable made me want to try. Yes, I'll try, Grandpa. I can't promise I'll be good right away. He laughed, deep and warm and proud. Damien, nobody's good right out of the gate. What you have is heart and grit. That alone will take you further than most people ever go. At first, I worked as a junior assistant in the planning department, filing documents, tracking project timelines, learning to read blueprints, those lines and symbols I once thought were secret code. The work was hard, but day by day I felt myself pushing open a door I'd never dared touch before. My coworkers were wary at first, like I was just the boss's grandson. But they changed. They saw me stay late to study, saw me take notes on every tiny detail, saw me turn down special treatment, refuse favors. And then they started calling me by my name. Not Harold's grandson, just Damien, a teammate, part of the crew. After work, I began exploring Chicago. I walked the bustling streets, spent hours at the Art Institute standing in front of paintings I'd only ever seen in books, sat in little cafes sipping hot chocolate, watching the world go by. For the first time in my life, I had time to breathe, to dream, to become a better version of myself. But the past, even though I'd left it behind, still clung to me like long shadows. Some nights, lying in that soft, perfect bed, I was suddenly yanked back. I'd hear Elizabeth's cutting voice, see Marcus's cold eyes, feel the old abandonment rush in like a sudden chill. Sometimes I wondered, do I really deserve this life? Or is it just a dream that's about to vanish? Grandpa noticed, even though I never said a word. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace in the living room, he handed me an old framed photo. It was my mother, Diana, her smile bright as sunlight breaking through fog. She was holding a little puppy, eyes crinkled with pure joy. Your mom always wanted you to be happy, Damien. I couldn't be there for her when she needed me most, boy, but with you, I won't let that happen again. I pressed the frame to my chest. Tears fell, silent, unstoppable. I wish I could have met her just once. I said, my voice trembling. Grandpa placed his hand on my back. You're more like her than you know. Strong, but gentle too. You carry her heart. Those words, they slipped into my old wounds like medicine. That night, for the first time in years, I opened a brand new notebook and started writing a journal. I wrote about the pain, about hope, about the future, and about a Damien Hale who was no longer a shadow. I didn't want to run from the past anymore. I didn't want to flee the scars carved deep inside me. I wanted to face them, stare straight into the darkness that once swallowed me, and turn it into the reason I'm stronger. One morning, about 3 months after moving to Chicago, I went to the mailbox in front of Grandpa Harold's mansion. Among the ads in newspapers was a faded envelope with no return address. But when I saw the messy handwriting on the front, my heart clenched. Dad's handwriting. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a single folded sheet, just a few handwritten lines that weighed like stones. Damien, I know I have no right to send this letter. I know what I did is unforgivable. I was wrong to keep the house. Wrong to keep the money your grandfather sent. Wrong to let the pain of losing your mother turn me into a terrible father. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know. I'm sorry. Elizabeth and Julian have moved out. I'm transferring the house back into your name the way your grandfather intended. I only hope that someday you can look at me without disappointment. Marcus, I read the letter 3 times. Every word felt like a thorn sinking deeper. I was angry. I was hurt. But for one small moment, there was a faint relief, like something inside me was slowly being untied. Still, she said, forgiveness doesn't come that easily. Years of being treated like excess baggage don't vanish with one letter. But I knew one thing for sure. I didn't want to carry resentment forever. I took the letter to Grandpa Harold. He read it slowly, his eyes growing heavy. After a long silence, he spoke, calm but thick with emotion. Damien, the choice is yours. If you want to keep the house, I'll help you. If you want to sell it, I'll support you. I closed my eyes. In my mind flashed the lawn on Hollow Creek, the red brick fireplace. everything I once dreamed of having. But now it was just a symbol of a past I had already stepped out of. Grandpa, I don't want that house. I want to sell it. I want to use the money to go to college. I want to become the engineer I always dreamed of being. Grandpa smiled, warm and proud. That's my grandson. I enrolled at a university in Chicago, civil engineering program. With the money from the house and Grandpa's support, I officially began the journey I once thought I'd never reach. The first days weren't easy. I was older than most of my classmates. Equations, simulations, design projects kept me up until 3 a.m., but I didn't give up. Every time I wanted to collapse, I thought of my mother. I thought of Grandpa. I thought of the promise I made to myself. I will not let my past decide my future. Chicago gave me something I never had. Real friends. People who valued me for who I am. In the engineering club, I met Emma, the girl with dark brown hair and a smile like sunlight breaking through morning fog. She always teased me about my ridiculously detailed notes. Damien, you write like someone's going to build a museum for your notebook someday. I laughed. For the first time, I felt what it was like to belong to a community I chose, and that chose me back. In the evenings, I came home to the mansion. Sometimes Grandpa and I sat by the fireplace talking about my mom, Diana, about his hard beginnings, about my dreams. And I knew I was finally living the life my mother wanted to retire for me. The house in Ohio was sold. The money went straight into my tuition fund. Marcus never reached out again. I didn't call either. Maybe one day I'll be ready to talk to him, but not today. 2 years have passed since that fateful Christmas night. Chicago has become my home. Not just because of the city lights, not just because of the skyscrapers, but because this place gave me the chance to become the person I always wanted to be. I'm in my second year of civil engineering. Every day I get closer to the dream that was once crushed in that old house in Ohio. I have friends. I have Emma. I have Grandpa Harold, the strongest anchor I've ever had. I was truly living. And I thought the past had finally stayed buried. Until that late autumn afternoon. I was cramming for midterms in the library when my phone buzzed. An unknown Ohio number. I hesitated. Then I answered. A trembling voice came through the line. Damien, it's Elizabeth. All the old arrogance that used to cling to her was gone. Only exhaustion and desperation remained. I know you're busy, but I need to talk about family. I gripped the phone tighter, my chest constricting. Family? What exactly do you mean by that? Elizabeth's voice cracked as she spoke. We're in real trouble, Damien. Serious trouble. I thought maybe you could help. I said nothing, just waited in silence for her to go on. And then she started pouring it out, her words breaking apart. Marcus lost his job after a scandal. I can't find work. We sold everything, and the debts are still piling up. We've moved into a tiny, run-down apartment. Julian? He's working at a fast food place, falling apart because he can't handle real life. When she mentioned Julian, a bitter laugh escaped me. No joy in it, just pure irony. Julian, the boy once spoiled like a little god, was now living the life I'd survived every single day. But the satisfaction lasted only a second. It was replaced by a cold, hollow feeling. Elizabeth, I said, my voice strangely calm. You're asking me for help? After everything? Dad took my house, kept my college money, told me I wasn't good enough. And now you're calling me family? Silence stretched on the line for a long time before she whispered, Julian is your brother. You can't just turn your back on us. I let out a soft, bitter laugh, the kind I never dared show back then. Family? I was never family to any of you. Not when I lived in the attic. Not when Dad said I wasn't enough. Not when you used fake photos to lie to my grandfather. And not now. Julian needs to learn to stand on his own, the way I had to. I don't owe you people anything. I hung up. The phone was still warm in my hand. My heart was pounding, but I felt lighter. The past had knocked. This time, I didn't open the door. Chicago is where I belong. Rumors from Ohio, no matter how hard I tried to ignore them, still slipped in like cold drafts through the sound of the cracks of memory. They never crashed in all at once. They seeped in slowly, as if the past was doing everything it could to remind me it was still alive, still refusing to let go. My father used to be the kind of man who could silence a room just by walking in. He carried authority, the calm of someone used to standing above others. He worked for a big insurance company, enough for Elizabeth and Julian to live in comfort I was never allowed to touch. But all that shine started to crack the night 2 years ago, the night Grandpa Harold cut off every penny, the night the truth shattered like glass hit by a stone. After that, everything fell like dominoes. The company faced a crisis. The family fell apart. And Marcus, who always saw himself as the pillar, suddenly couldn't bother to hold the weight. He lost focus. He lost his composure. And then he lost his job. 6 months after that Christmas, Marcus was fired. Since then, he hasn't found anything steady. The money he'd been getting from Grandpa, money meant for me, for the future my mother left behind, had all been burned on meaningless things. A new car for Julian. Expensive vacations to keep up appearances with the neighbors. Lavish parties so Elizabeth could keep pretending her family was still above everyone else. But money runs out. When the lifeline was cut, that lavish lifestyle instantly became a noose. Elizabeth, who prided herself on being the perfect housewife, had no idea how to survive in the real world. She had never worked, never budgeted, never faced reality. Her skills stopped at planning parties and competing with the other wives in town. When they had to leave the Hollow Creek house, the house I ended up selling to rebuild my own life, they moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Elizabeth called it unworthy of the Hale family. Yellowed walls, leaky pipes, mold clinging to every corner. Everything the opposite of the luxury they once flaunted. They sold Julian's car, his expensive toy collections, even the jewelry Elizabeth used to show off at parties. But the debts kept growing, credit cards, loans, unpaid bills. Julian, the family's pride and joy, dropped out after 1 semester, couldn't handle the pressure. Couldn't handle having to stand on his own. He took a job at a fast food joint, the same kind of work he used to mock me for. But Julian wasn't used to standing for hours, being yelled at by customers, working for minimum wage. He messed up, got scolded, and was fired after 3 months. Since then, Julian has been spiraling, jumping from job to job, never lasting more than a few weeks anywhere. I didn't seek out these details. They came to me through old acquaintances of Grandpa's, passed along like a somber warning. Elizabeth was trying to sell things online, but no one was buying. Marcus was working part-time at an auto repair shop. Money wasn't enough to live on. The apartment they were renting was under threat of eviction. For the first time in their lives, they were living the life I had known since childhood. A world of scarcity, insecurity, and fighting every single day just to survive. Then, a month after Elizabeth's call, a second letter arrived from Marcus. It was no longer an apology. It was a plea. He wrote, "The family is going bankrupt. We're about to be evicted. Julian has abandoned jobs, fallen in with the wrong crowd, drinking, getting into trouble. They have no one else left. I am their last hope." He kept repeating the word family, as if it could awaken some duty inside me. I read the letter in the huge bedroom of Grandpa's mansion. Outside, snow was blanketing Chicago in white. Inside, I felt old wounds being reopened. I had once been called unworthy. I had once slept in a freezing attic. I had once wished, just once, that Marcus would look at me like a son. But he never did. He chose Julian, always Julian. And now they wanted me to save them from the life they had built for themselves? I called Grandpa Harold and told him everything. He listened in silence, eyes darkening the same way they had that Christmas night 2 years ago. "What are you going to do?" he asked, voice calm, no pressure, no demands. I took a deep breath. I'm not going to help them. They once had everything. Julian once had everything I never did. If he has to stand up and live now, good. I don't owe them anything. Grandpa nodded. No more words were needed. I knew he agreed. While Marcus's family sank deeper in Ohio, my life in Chicago kept blooming. I aced my midterms. Emma, my closest friend, bought cake and threw a small celebration. She had become an important part of my life, not because of her bright smile, though it was beautiful, but because of the way she looked at me like I never had to prove anything to be enough. I took on more responsibility at Grandpa's company, handling bigger projects, even overseeing a small site on the outskirts. I was becoming, step by step, the person I always wanted to be. Not for anyone else, but for myself. I also started writing a book. Not to relive the pain, but to document the journey out of it. A story of healing, rebirth, and rebuilding self-worth from the ashes. Then, one winter day, as I walked through downtown Chicago with snow falling in thin sheets like powdered glass, I saw someone huddled against the corner of a building. Julian. He was wearing a thin jacket, face gaunt, eyes sunken, every trace of his old arrogance gone. I stopped. He saw me first, a faint spark of desperate hope lit in his eyes. "Damien." His voice was hoarse. How are you?" I kept a distance, just nodded slightly. "I'm good." "You but Julian gave a broken smile. "Not good. Really not good. I don't have anyone left. Can you help me out, just a little?" All my life I had dreamed of hearing those words, of seeing Julian brought low, of seeing justice served. But when it finally happened, all I felt was an indescribable emptiness. I looked at him for a long time. Dark childhood memories rose and dissolved, like breath in the cold. "Julian," I said slowly, "I had to stand up alone when no one helped me. Now it's your turn. Find a job. Learn to take responsibility. Don't expect me to fix what your family broke." I turned and walked away through the snow-covered street. I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because I had finally chosen my own life.